To all of you. Today we will be starting with the session on how to make an effective presentation. Because as doctors, as medical professionals and health professionals, making an effective presentation, especially during an academic activity, is very important. So that will be the first activity that we'll be doing today to get an understanding. And I'll be providing you some tips on how to make an effective presentation. So during this presentation, we will be learning few tips on making an effective presentation. Not something like this, not something like what you've seen on the screen. It has to be an effective presentation. Okay, to start with, now you have got your good news that your presentation has been approved and accepted for a poster presentation at SLMA conference. So first step for a good presentation. What should be that first step? Now today you have come to make this presentation. What should be the first step in a good presentation? Any guesses? Any guesses? Very good, very good. Sticking to time is very good. But before sticking to time, first step, you have to prepare, no? Preparation is the very important first step in any successful presentation. Okay. So when you are preparing, you have to decide in what format that you will be doing the presentation. So let's assume that now you are going to prepare your presentation. Most probably on PowerPoint. Okay. When you are starting to prepare your presentation, what is the first document that you will be looking at? What's the first document that you will be looking at? Again, any guesses? Exactly. Now you have been sent the instructions to prepare the presentation. Now for this session, SLMA has sent you very clear instructions on how to prepare your poster, because it has to be on the uniform format, and we have given clear guidelines on the size of the poster, and it has to be one slide, and the layout also. So all your presentations will be at the uniform standard. Here we are talking about digital infographics. So what we want as a poster is not just a slide that is crowded with words. Here we are talking about a visual message. So that is why the digital infographic concept is very important. Now you must have faced a challenge, no? How to put all the information, all the work that you have done maybe over so many months or years into one slide. Was that a challenge? That was, no? And also how to reduce the number of words and how to maximally utilize the space that is given. Probably this is much more challenging than doing a PowerPoint presentation, because within a very short time and within a very short space given, you have to clearly come out with your message. So that was the idea. Okay. Now talking about formats. Now here we have given the layout, but if you are to do a PowerPoint oral presentation, again you need to think of a possible layout or a format. Can anyone tell a possible structure for an oral presentation? What should be the starting slide? Generally, what should be the starting slide? Introduction, isn't it? Okay. Then objectives. Now here it will be easier because we have submitted your abstract, and abstract 2 was submitted with a particular structure. One common structure that is recommended is what we call IMRAD. Have you heard about that? The IMRAD format. What is IMRAD? Introduction, method, results analysis, and discussion. That's a very simple format. So once you have your abstract at hand, and if you can start with say one slide for each area, introduction slide, then maybe the objectives, method, results, discussion, and maybe conclusion, like that, then it's easier. You can start with a simple slide based on your abstract and maybe then expand. Okay, when you are preparing your PowerPoint presentation, again I'm sure that you are familiar. Most of you are here, some are senior, some are young graduates. Most of you are familiar with the PowerPoint. And PowerPoint, there are different slide layouts. Again, I assume that you know what's the appropriate slide layout. Now, like that is given in those slides, there is a special format for the title slide and then for the content areas. And then there are, if you want to go for a 2-column layout, again there are custom made slides. So you need to be familiar with those different formats if you are making an oral presentation and make the maximum use of it. And then in PowerPoint, there are different designs, templates that are available. Have you seen that? Now again, like in this slide that you can see, there are different templates. Okay, what do you think? Do you like those templates in the PowerPoint? What do you think? Yes, yeah. I honestly don't like, because most of these are very common. They are very boring. And your presentation and your research is unique. So why go for the boring templates that everyone uses in PowerPoint? The other reason is PowerPoint is meant for commercial purposes, business presentations. They may not be appropriate for the academic medical presentation. And some are like very crowded designs, very flowery designs. They might not give the message that we want. Okay? Even though they may look very nice, very attractive, they might not be appropriate. And technically also they might not be appropriate, because you might see some of the slide designs have a gradient. So one end it is basically very light, other end it's very dark. So when you put the lettering into that template, then some of the letters become invisible. So again, best thing is, if you want to use PowerPoint, start with a simple template, maybe even a blank template. And if you are technically savvy, you can put a background color that you want and adjust your background and make your background and the format and the layout that would enhance your own presentation. For example, if you are making a presentation on DNA, maybe on the side there can be maybe an image of DNA, something like that. And you can always put your institution logo in the slide, in the background. So all these things would make your format, your layout very unique to you. So think about those aspects also. Then what about the background, slide background? Again, very simple rules. One is that if you are using light font, go for darker background. If you are using dark font, okay, dark colors, then go for lighter background. Because the whole idea is that your slide and your content should stand out. Okay, so that's the main idea. And then any other factors that you are thinking about when you select your background, apart from this simple basic? Any idea? What about the lecture hall that you are doing the lecture? Yes, no? Yeah. Can you give some example? Yeah, say if the lecture hall is very well illuminated, then if you use a white background, that might be a disaster, no? Because that will not stand out. And similarly, if you are doing a presentation in a darkened lecture hall, then using a dark background will not be appropriate. So think about the lecture hall also, and think about the ambience of the lecture hall. Now here, the lecture hall environment is generally reddish maroon color. So ideally, if you are making a presentation, if it is projected on a screen here, then it should match with that background also. So think about all these aspects. Those are additional small things that will make your presentation very professional. And sometimes experienced presenters go to the extent of matching their suit and the color and maybe the dress or the tie or sari, whatever, with the ambience and the the lecture hall and your slide background. That's also important. For example, now if I have been wearing maybe a maroon colored suit here, then only the face would have been visible. Okay? So those small things matter. Those preparations actually matter to do a very high class, high professional presentation. Then about font. What's the font that we have used here? What's the font? Any idea? What are the fonts that you know? Times New Roman, Arial, Calibri. Who like Times New Roman? Okay. Who like Calibri, Arial? Okay. What do you think? I suppose Calibri and Arial would be better for visual presentations. They are called sans serif fonts. What is meant by that is that they don't have very sharp edges. And that has an advantage because that is easy on the eye. Now Times New Roman, we are very familiar. All of us have been working with that and we automatically go for Times New Roman. That's historically because in the past it was the font that was used for typing. But with the digital era, what's more appropriate if you want to get the best visual impact, then fonts like Calibri, the sans serif fonts would be very professional and very much readable, because readability is very important. For a poster, readability is so very important because you should be able to read from a distance, and nowadays with the physical distance in coming into play, that becomes even more important. So font, not only font, the font size. Okay, font size is very important because sometimes we put very small font and which is not visible. Okay, that's not fair by the audience. Generally, a rule of thumb is when you put your word in letter into PowerPoint slide, and when you go to the slide sort of view, if you can read them without a problem, that should be generally adequate. So don't go for font sizes that we are used to. Say 12 font size is the one that are generally used for the documents. No, that is not suitable for presentations. You need much larger. As a rule of thumb, at least around 18 is required. Okay, so think about those aspects also. And there is another thing that you need to remember. This is PowerPoint, not Power Paragraphs. Again, you must have seen even the experienced presenters just copying and pasting from internet or textbooks and put in paragraphs. Don't do that, because PowerPoint is not a book, not a paragraph, it's points. Okay, there is a rule of thumb again, that is 6 lines per slide. Okay, and per each line around 6 words. And then after each sixth slide, there should be a photograph or a graphic or an image to break the monotony. Now it will not be applicable for poster presentations. Poster presentation is much more difficult challenge, but for a formal oral presentation, try to follow these guidelines. It will again make your presentation more attractive and more professional. Okay, then about the visual images. Again, very important. And nowadays, it's very easy to go to internet and find images. Again, having said that, inappropriate images will not enhance your presentation. Whatever image that you are selecting should enhance your presentation. That's very important. They should be appropriate. And also the way you place your images. Say if you put a certain point, it's far better to put the similar image in the same place. Okay? Say if you are talking about, say, COVID-19 pathophysiology, then the pathophysiology image should be positioned similarly. That is what we call juxtapositioning. We position it appropriately. Then the message goes together. So all these are very important to give a very effective message. Position in the photos. And also, how do you insert these images? Just copy and paste? No, you should not be doing that. Why? When you copy and paste, sometimes the image may be too small, then you are dragging and the resolution become worse. If the image is too large, then again if you drag the image, what will happen? It will get distorted. So you will get images like Klinefelter-Marfan syndrome. So that is not appropriate. How do you do that then? insert image. Okay, insert image. That is basically when you go to the PowerPoint slide, like we are attaching a PowerPoint attachment to your emails, you click on that. So if you want to insert image, you can do that very easily. If you want to insert a video, that's also you can insert the video. But if you want to play a video, make sure that the technology will support you. Make sure that the original video is also in the same folder with the PowerPoint. If you just insert, it might not work and you will be in a very embarrassing situation. So those small technologies, technical things, very important. The visual images are so very important. Now next move into data presentation. That again is very important, presenting data. What are the two main visual ways of presenting data? One is tables. Second, graphs or charts. Okay, now if you have a choice, what would you go for? Graph or a table? For the same information? In a visual presentation, if you have a choice, what would you go for? Graph, no? Why? Because you can, the information can be captured visually within short time. So that is very important. Okay? Visual images, if you want to go, if you have a choice, go for a graph. Don't use the graph and the chart together for the same information. That is technically wrong. If you have a preference, go for a graph or a chart. However, if you have to show large amount of information and numbers, then you might try to go for a table. Again, having said that, don't go for these kind of railway timetable tables. Within the short time available, your audience cannot grasp that. So if you are put in a table, plan your table well, categorize the data points, and then should not be more than 5 columns. Or rows again should not be more than 5, 6. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for the audience to capture. So you have to categorize your data and plan the graph accordingly. Similarly, if you are going for a chart or a graph, this kind of graph, what we call the New York skyline type, don't do that, because within the short time available, the audience cannot capture it. So go for a categorization. And there are different graph types, many different types of graphs. So there can be line graphs, columns, bar charts, pie charts. Okay. If it's a line diagram, what would be the purpose of that? Say if you want to show an increase, then that could be a line diagram. Okay. And if you want to show a comparison, maybe you can go for columns. And if you want to go for maybe distribution, you can go for a pie chart. So that also select appropriately. Alright. So these are the small things that you can follow to make an effective PowerPoint presentation, to prepare effective PowerPoint presentation. Now getting back to the actual presentation. Now what happens? The big day has come. So how are you going to do the presentation? Before coming here, have you rehearsed? I'm sure most of you have done your rehearsal. It's very important. Before making a presentation, rehearse. You can rehearse with a friend. What are the other ways that you can rehearse? You can go in front of a mirror, no? And make a presentation. And you can get one of your friends to video record. Nowadays, all of you have smartphones, so that would be a good idea. Get a friend of yours to video record your presentation, and then you can watch it. In that way, you might be able to see certain errors that others will not tell you. Okay? Because there may be some mannerisms or certain gestures that might not be appropriate. Or maybe the poses, long poses, short poses. Sometimes when we speak, we say or sometimes may. All these things come into, without us knowing, inadvertently all these mistakes come into play. If you do a video and then play it back, you will see all these errors. Now here you are lucky because we will be video recording all your presentations and will be giving to you. So you can find out what are the areas for improvement as well. So that's very important. And also another trick that you can do is, if you video record and if you can fast forward, then certain mannerisms get exaggerated and you can easily find them. Like that is what we call, it's like a Mickey Mouse effect. You can find out what are the certain funny mannerisms or gestures that you are making. So all these are important. Preparation is very important. Find out what is the technology available. Sometimes again you might have seen presenters coming to the podium and trying to open their presentation. Find out what are the keyboard shortcuts that are available. Now if your laptop is not available here, again there can be different ways of opening your presentation. The keyboard shortcuts to open a presentation, to close a presentation, to move to a next slide, all these are important. Another important trick that you can have in PowerPoint is that in every slide have a hyperlink to the last slide, because if you are going behind time, sometimes you can make use of that slide to that hyperlink to move into the final slide without the audience knowing it. Because what many do is that they just go through the slides very fast. If they are short of time, if the judges are threatening them, they go through the slides very fast. Again, that is very unsightly. Those small tricks are very important. So be familiar with the keyboard shortcuts. Again, you won't need it today, but for the future, all these tips would be very important. Then when you are making the presentation, very important that you start in a very professional way, calmly, and when you go there, have a printout of your presentation. Then you are feeling more comfortable, because all of us, many even experienced presenters, have some kind of apprehension before getting into the podium. Okay, that's natural, and you need that also for optimum performance. But if you are too anxious, then it will be difficult. So one thing that you can do is, when you are going to the presentation, get advice from maybe a senior, get someone to observe your presentation, have a printout, and if possible, write down the presentation in exact words. Especially if you are doing something like an oration or maybe a presidential address, write down each and every word that you are going to say. That's difficult, but nowadays with the technology, you should be able to do that without too much problem. Because now there are software, if you can basically talk, that also can be converted into words. So write down every word that you are going to say if you are doing an important presentation. If you cannot do that, at least write down the opening statement. How you greet the audience, how you address the chairperson, write down that part. You might not even need to look at that. But when you have that at hand, you are very comfortable that you have some help. Because the most difficult thing is starting the presentation. Once you are in the deep end, you have to swim. Then you will make the presentation anyway, because once you are in the podium, you can't just get down and run. But the difficult thing is starting. So write down the first statement that you are starting, and then move on from there onwards. So those small tips. And also, when you are making your presentation, eye contact is so very important. Maintain a good eye contact with the audience. What we say is, it should be like a radar, and it should be like a U. U means that you are basically covering the whole audience. Should not be a T. T is only the front and the aisle. So that is one mistake that many presenters make. Try to make the eye contact with everyone. This doesn't mean that you need to stare at each and every person. But if you maintain your gaze around, say, eye line and the hairline. Okay. Now here all of you are having the hairline, so there is no problem. If you maintain that level, then the audience will be understanding and feeling that you are looking at each person's eye contact. That's very important. Gestures, again, even in a scientific presentation, body language is important. Confident body language, clear voice, voice modulation, increase in when you want to emphasize, and body language very important. For example, now if you want to emphasize a certain point, your body language should be in line with the message that you are going to say. Okay, there are three causes. There are three causes that would lead to an epidemic. Am I correct here? No. Because my gesture is not in line. The COVID-19 situation in Sri Lanka is decreasing. Okay, so the body language is, the gesture is not appropriate. So you need to plan them also. And what is appropriate for scientific presentation is, your gesture should be with the line of your body. Okay, like that. Politicians do like this. Nowadays, these are very common. So we should not be going for that. We are not politicians. We are academics and professionals. So ours, it has to be within the line of the body. So all these are very important. Another thing is sticking to time. In a scientific academic presentation, sticking to time is very important. If you go beyond the time, that's a cardinal sin. Today it would be a real challenge because you are given a very short time, but definitely possible. Many who presented before, everyone who presented before you, they all stick to time. That's a very good improvement that I am seeing. I have seen presentations over last 20 years. Nowadays the quality of the presentations by the doctors have gone up very high, very well. That's a very good positive sign. Maybe the efforts of everyone who are concerned is a very good sign. People are making good presentations, PowerPoint slides are of good quality and stick in time. That's a very important thing. Even in international conference, sometimes you see that the presenters are going beyond time. So don't go beyond time. So there you need to decide on the content that you are putting to your PowerPoint presentation. Now if you are given a 5 minute, then having 30 slides, you are definitely in disaster. Again, the rule of thumb is 2 content slides per 1 minute. Within 1 minute, you can basically cover 2 content slides. So that could be a rule of thumb to decide the number of slides for an oral presentation. That's very important. You can't cover hundreds of slides within 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Nowadays, the time given is very short. That's very important. And if you go beyond time, if there are signs that you are going beyond time, again, you can have certain strategies like I have mentioned, so that you can move into the end of the presentation swiftly without others knowing it. Okay, and so that rule of thumb is very important. And another thing is, don't read everything that is there in the PowerPoint slide. People can see it. Okay, the PowerPoint slide is your guide, and you don't have to read each and every word there. And sometimes you might have to say additional things, because this is your presentation. PowerPoint is not your presentation. That is just a guide, and that people can read. So don't make the mistake of reading each and every word of the PowerPoint presentation. That is not required. Okay, so these are the small tips, and then you will be moving to the question and answer session where the judges will be asking questions from you. Again, this can be a moment for apprehension, but don't worry. You are the person who knows the best about your presentation. Okay, so another thing that you can do is, you can have some slides that you are not showing in your presentation with some additional data that you are expecting those questions. You expect those questions. Then you can show them if they ask those additional data. You are not going to put them in your presentation, but some additional data may be available. So be very prepared. If you don't know something, or if you haven't done something, be very honest and then accept. That's fine. And sometimes if you are not clear about the question, you can always ask the judge to repeat the question, or the questioner to repeat the question. In that way you can buy some time. And when you are responding, be very polite, confident, but be very polite. You can thank the questioner for asking that important question, and while telling that, you might gain some important time to think also. Okay, and at the end of that, it will be a fantastic presentation. Okay, so I am sure that all of you will be able to do very good presentations today, and with time, with experience, then with a technical know-how, all of you will be able to very good, very professional presentation. Thank you.